Talisa Greer was 34 years old when her doctor of 10 years leaned in close during a routine exam and whispered 6 words that didn't belong in a checkup room. "Run from your husband. Now." She'd come in for tremors, for the metallic taste she couldn't explain, for the memory lapses Desmond had assured her again and again were just her getting older. Dr. Brooks didn't elaborate. He didn't have to. He'd just spent the last hour staring at a toxicology panel that shouldn't have existed in a healthy 34-year-old woman, the same week she'd signed paperwork Desmond called responsible adult stuff. Insurance, updated wills, $2 million with his name as sole beneficiary, in handwriting that wasn't quite hers. Desmond thought she was too tired, too foggy, too grateful for his patience to ever look closely. He had no idea she'd already started taking pictures of the desk, of the garage, of bottles she'd never been allowed to touch. Talisa sat in her car outside the clinic, hands still shaking, and made a decision that would end one of their lives as they knew it. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today, and if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story is even more intense. The buyers cried. That almost never happened anymore, not after 15 years of deals, of handshakes, of keys sliding across conference room tables. But the Pattersons were young, and this was their first home. And when Talisa slid the folder across to them and said, "It's yours," the wife pressed both hands over her mouth, and her husband grabbed Talisa's hand with both of his and just held it. Talisa smiled, a real one, the kind she didn't have to practice. "Congratulations," she said. Back at the Meridian Realty office, her colleague Dana was already pulling up the final numbers on the wall screen. $618,000, a clean close, 11 days under the listing average for the Briarwood corridor. Dana let out a low whistle and leaned back in her chair. "How do you always know when to push and when to wait?" Dana asked. "I had the same buyer pool on the Linwood property and I couldn't move them." "You pushed too early," Talisa said, setting her bag down and pulling up her email. The Pattersons needed one more weekend to talk themselves into it. You give people the space to want something, they come back hungrier. "You're scary, you know that?" Dana said it with admiration. Talisa laughed. It felt good. It felt like herself. She was still carrying that feeling when she pulled into the driveway 40 minutes later. The house was a stately colonial on Aldermore Court. 4 bedrooms, a yard she'd always meant to do more with, and the lights in the front room were on, which meant Desmond was home. She found him at the kitchen island, laptop open, reading glasses pushed up on his nose. He didn't look up when she came in. "Hey," she said. "Hey." He clicked something, scrolled.
"I closed the Patterson deal today, 618.
He reached for his coffee cup without looking at her. "That the Briarwood one?" "Yeah." "Good." He finally glanced up, a half-second of eye contact, then back to the screen. "Did you start the laundry? I put a pile on the chair in the bedroom." Talisa set her keys down on the counter, slowly. "No," she said. "I was at work." He didn't respond to that. She went upstairs to change. The pile was on the chair, just like he said. She stared at it for a moment, then picked it up and brought it to the hamper, because it was easier than thinking about why she did. Sunday dinner was at Eleanor's. Eleanor Greer lived in a tall brick house in Fairhaven that always smelled like lemon oil and dried flowers. She had opinions about everything, and delivered them in a warm, sugary tone that made disagreement feel rude. She had never once in 9 years asked Talisa anything about her job. They were clearing the table when Eleanor looked at Talisa with the particular soft concern she reserved for problems she had already diagnosed. "You look thin in the face," Eleanor said. "Not a good thin." "I've been tired," Talisa said. "And your hair." Eleanor touched her own silver coif. "Is it thinning? Right here in the front?" She gestured at Talisa's hairline like she was pointing at a crack in the wall. Talisa's hand moved involuntarily toward her head. She stopped it. "I hadn't noticed," she said. "It's just age, baby." Eleanor said it gently, the way you say it's just rain to someone standing in a downpour. You're not a little girl anymore. The body starts doing what it does. Nothing to be upset about. She patted Talisa's hand and picked up a serving dish. Desmond, from across the table, added without looking up from his phone, I keep telling her she should take better care of herself. Slow down a little. Talisa looked at him. He wasn't wrong in a way she could easily argue. That was the thing. The fatigue was real. The hair, she had noticed it. Every morning, more in the drain than there should be. There was a metallic taste in the back of her throat sometimes, faint, like old pennies, that she kept meaning to mention to someone. She hadn't mentioned it to anyone. In the car on the way home, Desmond brought up the paperwork. I had the estate attorney pull some stuff together, he said, eyes on the road. Will update, life insurance review, responsible adult stuff. We keep putting it off. Okay, Talisa said. I just need your signatures on a few things. I'll leave them on the desk. She signed them after her shower, sitting at his desk in the study in her robe, the lamp throwing a warm yellow circle on the pages. There were 3 documents. Maybe 4. She couldn't quite track it. Her eyes kept sliding off the lines. She told herself she'd read everything properly tomorrow. She told herself Desmond would have said something if there was anything important she needed to understand. She signed where the little sticky tab said to sign. She capped the pen. She turned off the lamp. In bed, with the room dark and the house quiet, she lay on her back and stared at the ceiling. There was something sitting in her chest. Not pain, not quite worry, just a low, shapeless unease, like a sound she couldn't quite hear. Stress, she thought. It's just stress. She closed her eyes. The tremor started on a Tuesday. Not a bad one, not the kind anyone would notice right away, just a faint, fluttering unsteadiness in her right hand, like a string pulled too tight and then released. She felt it during the Kessler closing, a 2-story craftsman on Mercer Street, a clean deal, a good couple, when she reached across the table to pass the signature packet to the seller's attorney, and her hand shook enough to rattle the pages. Just barely. But the attorney noticed. She saw his eyes drop to her hand for a half-second before he looked back up. She got through the rest of the closing by pressing her right hand flat against the table when she wasn't using it, like she was keeping it from floating away. She smiled at the right moments, she said the right things, but her face felt like a mask she was holding up by the edges, and when she walked out to the parking lot afterward, she sat in her car for 5 full minutes before she trusted herself to drive. She told Desmond that night. She didn't mean to, exactly. She'd been turning it over all day, the tremor, and the other things she'd been adding to a list she hadn't wanted to make official by writing it down. The memory lapses, small ones, but wrong, blanking on a client's name she'd known for months, losing a word in the middle of a sentence, standing in the kitchen and forgetting what she'd come for, the metallic taste, which had gotten stronger, a faint bitterness at the back of her teeth, like she'd been sucking on a copper pipe. She told him while he was washing dishes, her voice carefully even. My hand was shaking today, she said, during the Kessler close, and I've been having this taste in my mouth, metallic, kind of, and sometimes I just... She paused. I lose words. In the middle of a sentence. Desmond rinsed a glass, set it on the rack. Talisa. He said her name with a kind of patient heaviness, like a teacher correcting the same mistake for the 3rd time. You are running yourself into the ground. You have been for months. I know I'm tired, but this feels... Stress does exactly that. He turned off the faucet and dried his hands. It messes with your memory, your nerves, all of it. I see it all the time. People convince themselves something's physically wrong when really, they just need to decompress. He folded the dish towel with the same deliberate calm he brought to everything. He looked at her with something that wore the shape of concern. You don't need a doctor, he said. You need a weekend without your phone. Eleanor called the next morning. Talisa was in her car outside a property on Dunmore Avenue when the phone buzzed. She answered out of habit. Desmond mentioned you've been feeling off, Eleanor said, in the voice she used when she had already drawn her conclusions. These things happen, sweetheart. I went through something very similar at your age. You start losing track of things. You feel foggy. It's just your body shifting gears. It's not just fogginess. Have you been sleeping? You have to sleep. A small pause. You know, honestly, I've thought for a while that you push yourself too hard with that job. Some women just aren't built for that kind of pressure long term. There's no shame in it. Talissa stared through the windshield at the house across the street. I'm fine with the pressure, she said. Of course you are. Eleanor's voice was smooth as a closed door. I'm just saying, listen to your body, baby. That evening, Desmond found her looking up internists covered under their plan. She hadn't heard him come into the study. What are you doing? He asked. She turned the screen slightly, instinctively, then stopped herself. Looking into seeing Dr. Brooks. Just a checkup. His expression shifted, not into anger, but into something softer and more dismissive. He leaned against the doorframe and crossed his arms. That's a pretty expensive copay for nerves, babe. A small, almost fond smile. Brooks is going to tell you exactly what I'm telling you. Drink more water, stress less, and we'll be out the visit fee for the privilege. Maybe. I'm just saying it's not nothing financially. He pushed off the doorframe. But, obviously, do what you want. He left. She sat there for a moment. Then she picked up her phone and booked the appointment directly through Dr. Brooks's patient portal, the one Desmond didn't have the login for. She made it for the following Thursday, 9 a.m. She put it in her calendar under a client's name. She didn't feel good about the lie, but she didn't cancel it either. Thursday morning, she pulled into the clinic parking lot at 8:47. The engine ticked quiet. Around her, the lot was half full. Ordinary. A woman lifting a stroller from a minivan, an older man moving slowly toward the entrance, a cluster of pigeons working the edge of the curb. Talissa sat with her hands in her lap. Her right hand was still. For now. She looked at the clinic doors, the automatic glass ones, catching the gray morning light. She breathed in. She breathed out. Dr. Brooks had known Talissa for 10 years. He'd seen her through a broken wrist, 2 rounds of bronchitis, a bad allergic reaction to amoxicillin, and the kind of low-grade anxiety that came with running your own book of business in a volatile housing market. He knew her chart the way a careful man knows a familiar road, every curve, every marker. He knew she ran 3 miles 4 times a week. He knew her blood pressure sat at a calm, steady 112/70. He knew she didn't smoke, drank occasionally, and kept her numbers clean. So when she sat on the exam table and walked him through her symptoms, the tremor, the metallic taste, the memory gaps, the fatigue that sleep didn't fix, he listened without interrupting. And when she finished, he didn't say anything for a moment. He looked at her chart. He looked at her hands. How long? He asked. The fatigue, maybe 8 months. The taste, 4 or 5. The tremor started about 2 weeks ago. He nodded slowly. He pressed 2 fingers to the inside of her wrist. He asked her to hold her hands out flat in front of her, palms down, and he watched them. The right one had a faint, rhythmic tremor. Very small, very consistent. He checked her eyes, her reflexes. He pressed carefully along her abdomen and asked about nausea, about appetite, about any sensation of tingling in her feet or fingertips. She said yes to the tingling. She'd forgotten to mention that. She'd gotten so used to it she'd stopped counting it. He wrote something on his notepad. Then he set the pen down. Talissa, he said, your chart shows me a healthy 34-year-old woman. These symptoms don't belong in this chart. She looked at him. What does that mean? It means I'm not running a standard panel today. He said it simply, the way he said everything. No drama, no hedge. I'm ordering a full toxicology workup. Comprehensive heavy metal screening. I want it processed today, so I'm going to mark it urgent. She felt something shift in her chest. Not panic. Something quieter. Something like the moment before you understand a thing you've been trying not to understand. "Okay," she said. He sent her down to the lab himself. He called her back at 2:17 that same afternoon. She was parked outside a coffee shop, a latte going cold in the cup holder, when her phone rang with the clinic's number. She answered before the second ring. "Can you come back in?" Dr. Brooks said. "I have your results. I'd like to go over them in person." His voice was even. It told her nothing and everything. She was back in his office by 3:00. He set the printed panel on the desk between them and let her read the flagged lines first. She was good with numbers. She understood what elevated meant. She saw the markers highlighted in red: lead, arsenic, a third she didn't recognize at first, all sitting above their reference ranges. Not catastrophically, not acutely, but elevated in a pattern. A steady, accumulated pattern. "This is consistent," Dr. Brooks said carefully, "with chronic, low-dose exposure over a period of months. The body accumulates it slowly. The symptoms present gradually. Memory disruption, peripheral tingling, tremor, metallic taste. It all fits." The coffee shop cup was still in her hand. She didn't remember picking it up. "Exposure to what?" she asked. Her voice came out steady. She was almost surprised. "That's what a full investigation would determine." He paused. "I've filed this with the state health office. That's required. Someone will follow up." Another pause, shorter. "But Talisa," he leaned forward across the desk. His voice dropped to just above a whisper. "Run from your husband. Tonight." She drove home on autopilot. The streets looked the same. The afternoon light was the same pale gold it always was in October. A school bus was stopped on Clearfield with its red lights blinking. She waited behind it without seeing it. "Run from your husband. Tonight." She pulled into the driveway at 4:06. Desmond's car was gone. He worked until 6 on Thursdays. She knew his schedule better than he knew hers. She had less than 2 hours. She moved fast, but she didn't panic. She went to his study first. The insurance documents were in the second drawer, in a manila folder with her name on the tab. She didn't read them. Not yet. She photographed every page with her phone, front and back, in the gray light from the window. 14 pages. She got all of them. Then the garage. There was a shelf along the back wall she'd always understood, without being told directly, was his. His tools, his supplies, his business. She'd never touched it. She looked at it now with different eyes. 3 small amber bottles. No pharmacy labels, no names. Just a handwritten date on a strip of masking tape on each one. She photographed them from every angle. She did not touch them. Then she went upstairs and packed a bag. She was back in her car in 40 minutes. She pulled out of the driveway and turned left, away from the direction of the grocery store, away from the dry cleaner, away from every errand that would have brought her back. She called Wren. "I need to come to you," she said. Wren didn't ask why. "I'm home. Come now." By the time the streetlights came on, Talisa was standing at Wren's door with a bag over her shoulder and the photograph still warm on her phone. Wren opened the door, took one look at her face, and stepped aside without a word. Wren's apartment was warm and smelled like coffee and the vanilla candle she kept on the kitchen counter. Talisa sat at the small dining table, both hands wrapped around a mug of tea she hadn't drunk yet, and told her everything. She told it in order: the fatigue that had started almost a year ago, Desmond's quiet, steady explanations, "You're not 25 anymore, babe," and Eleanor's agreeable nods over Sunday pot roast, the tremor at the closing table, the metallic taste she'd gotten so used to she almost forgot it was wrong. Dr. Brooks's face when he read the panel results, his voice dropping low across the desk. She told Wren what he'd whispered. Wren didn't say anything for a long moment. Her hands were flat on the table. Her jaw was tight. "Show me the photos," she said. Talisa unlocked her phone and slid it across. Wren went through them slowly, with the focus of someone who spent her days reading numbers that were meant to hide things. She zoomed in on the insurance documents. She went back through them twice. When she got to the garage bottles, she stopped. "No label," Wren said. It wasn't a question. No label. Wren set the phone down and looked at Talissa directly. You did the right thing leaving tonight. I know. You cannot go back to that house. I know that too. Wren refilled her tea without being asked. Neither of them slept much. By 7 the next morning, Wren was at her desk. She worked the way she always worked, quietly, completely, with the kind of focus that made her good at finding exactly what people didn't want found. She had access to financial databases through her firm. She had credentials, contacts, and 10 years of practice following paper trails that had been deliberately buried. Talissa sat on the couch with her legs pulled under her and watched Wren work. At 9:40, Wren stopped typing. Come here, she said. Her voice was flat, controlled, the tone Wren used when she was keeping something in. Talissa crossed the room and stood behind her. The screen showed a life insurance policy summary. The policyholder was listed as Desmond A. Greer. The insured was Talissa M. Greer. The coverage amount sat in clean black numbers at the top of the document. $2 million. When was it issued? Talissa asked. Wren pointed. 3 months ago, August 14th. Talissa thought back. Her hands had started trembling in late August. The metallic taste. She'd first noticed it around then, too. She'd mentioned it to Desmond one morning over breakfast, and he told her she was probably drinking too much coffee. Beneficiary? She asked. Soul. Him. Wren scrolled down. And look at this. She pointed to the signature line on the application. Talissa leaned in. The signature read, Talissa M. Greer, in looping, careful cursive. Talissa stared at it. She did not write in cursive. She never had. Her signature was a sharp, fast print, a habit from years of signing contracts at closings, quick and legible. She'd signed her name thousands of times. It looked nothing like the neat loops on that screen. That's not my signature, she said. No, Wren said. It's not. Talissa straightened up. She walked back to the couch and sat down. She thought about the manila folder in Desmond's desk drawer, her name on the tab. She thought about him sliding papers across the kitchen table on a Sunday night, his voice easy and reasonable. Just responsible adult stuff, babe. Estate planning. It's overdue. And her own tired hands reaching for the pen because she hadn't had the energy to push back. That paperwork had been cover. She understood that now. He'd given her something real to sign, so there would be a fresh signature on file, something to study, something to copy. She had signed her own death warrant, and he had used it as a practice run. The thought didn't make her cry. It made her very, very still. I'm not going home, she said. Good. And I'm not calling him. Not yet. Wren turned in her chair. What are you thinking? I'm thinking he's been careful, which means I have to be more careful. Talissa looked at her hands resting in her lap, the right one with its faint, persistent tremor. I'm not doing anything until the case is airtight. The insurance policy, the toxicology, whatever is in those bottles in the garage. She paused. Everything. Wren nodded slowly. Then that's what we build. That afternoon, Talissa picked up her phone and called Dr. Brooks. He answered on the second ring. Talissa. His voice was the same steady, careful tone it always was. I was hoping you'd call. I'm safe, she said. I left last night. I'm with Wren. Good. A pause. Good. I need to tell you something, she said. And then I need to ask you some questions about the toxicology report. She heard him pull out a chair and sit down. I found a life insurance policy, she said. $2 million, taken out 3 months ago. The signature on the application isn't mine. The line was quiet for a moment. Tell me everything, Dr. Brooks said. Dr. Brooks came to Wren's apartment the next morning. He arrived with a folder tucked under one arm and a paper coffee cup in his other hand, still wearing his coat from the cold outside. He sat at the dining table across from Talisa and Ren and opened the folder without preamble. He was that kind of man. No wasted words, no soft lead-in. Just the information, laid out clearly, because clarity was what the moment required. "The substance in your blood work," he said, turning the printed panel results to face them, "isn't something you can buy at a pharmacy counter. It's not something you order online." He tapped the page. "The compound is a heavy metal derivative. It's used in very specific clinical and research settings. Getting it requires a pharmaceutical supply account, proper credentials, and documented purpose." Talisa looked at the page. The words were technical, but the meaning wasn't. "Desmond manages pharmaceutical supply logistics," she said, flat, stating a fact she'd known for years without ever once seeing it as dangerous. "Yes." Dr. Brooks folded his hands on the table. "Whoever sourced this had access to a hospital supply chain, not fringe access. Regular, working, credentialed access." Ren was already at her desk. She hadn't waited for him to finish the sentence. She was typing, her coffee untouched, her reading glasses low on her nose. She had a contact at a healthcare compliance firm, someone she'd worked with 2 years ago on a hospital billing audit. It had taken her one text message the night before and a returned call by 7 that morning to get what she needed. "Badge logs," Ren said without turning around. "Desmond's access records from the hospital supply system. I've got 3 months of entries." Dr. Brooks glanced over his shoulder at her screen. "How did you—" "Compliance audit trail," Ren said. "Legal. My contact pulled it as part of an ongoing review." She said it the way she said most things. Matter of fact, no invitation to ask follow-up questions. Talisa came and stood behind her again, the same position she'd been in 2 days ago, looking at the insurance policy. It felt like she was spending this week learning, one document at a time, exactly how carefully Desmond had built the cage around her. Ren scrolled through the access log slowly. Rows of entries, timestamps, badge ID numbers, supply room codes. "There," Ren said. She stopped on a cluster of entries, 6 of them, spread across 3 months. The badge ID wasn't Desmond's, but the entries were tied to a user account that shared an access group with his, one that had sign-off from his supervisor level. Ren cross-referenced the ID number against the staff directory her contact had included. The name that came up was Bianca Hall, junior buyer, supply chain, contract pharmaceuticals. "Who is she?" Talisa asked. "Junior buyer at the distributor his hospital contracts with," Ren said. "She's not hospital staff directly, but her clearance level gives her access to certain supply rooms for order verification." Ren pointed at the timestamps. "These 6 withdrawals, small quantities, each one logged under personal use authorization. It's an internal category, usually used for clinical samples. Easy to misuse if no one's watching closely." "Someone was watching her account and not flagging it," Talisa said. "Or someone made sure no one would," Ren said. Talisa was quiet for a moment. She thought about the phrase, personal use authorization. She thought about Desmond, charming and reasonable, the way he could make anything sound ordinary. "Pull her name," she said. "Everything you can find connected to Desmond." Ren was already moving. It didn't take long. Ren found the thread inside of 20 minutes, a shared email domain between Bianca's work account and a private address that had been used to send purchase confirmations to a P.O. box registered under a shell name Ren flagged immediately as structured to obscure ownership. But it was Talisa who found the messages. She found them on the cloud backup she'd quietly pulled from Desmond's old tablet before she left, a device he kept in the garage, which she'd photographed along with the bottles. She'd backed it up remotely through a shared family account he'd forgotten she still had access to. The messages were not ambiguous. Over a year of them, Desmond and Bianca. The early ones were careful, written with the particular lightness of 2 people pretending something wasn't what it was. The later ones were less careful. "You're the only one who gets it. She doesn't notice anything anymore. Don't worry about the order. Just run it through the usual code. It's for personal use. I'll explain later." Bianca's replies were trusting, eager, the messages of someone who believed the person writing to her meant what he said. "Whatever you need, Des. You know I've got you." Talissa printed the messages. She printed the badge logs. She laid them across Wren's dining table next to the insurance policy, next to the toxicology report, next to the photo of the unlabeled bottles from the garage. She stood over the table and looked at all of it together. Bianca Hall had no idea what she'd been supplying. That much was plain from every word she'd written. Trusting, warm, completely in the dark. Desmond had told her just enough to keep her moving and nothing close to the truth. He had used her, the same way he had used Talissa. Wren made the call just after noon. Her contact was a paralegal named Dora, a compact, efficient woman Wren had worked with twice before, once on a probate dispute and once on a fraud case that had taken almost a year to untangle. Dora had a particular talent for finding things that had been filed once and never looked at again. Old case numbers, death certificates, marriage licenses from counties where records hadn't yet been digitized. Talissa sat on the couch and listened to Wren's half of the conversation. "Carol Greer, née Whitmore," Wren said. "Married name Greer. Death date approximately 8 years ago. Start with Harmon County." A pause. "No, natural causes, no autopsy. That's why it'll be in paper files." Another pause. "Yes, everything you can pull." She hung up and looked at Talissa. 2 hours, Wren said. "Maybe 3. It took 90 minutes. Dora sent a scanned packet, 11 pages. Wren printed them at the small printer on her desk and brought the stack to the dining table without sorting them first. She set them down in the center of everything else that was already there. The insurance policy, the toxicology report, the badge logs, the printed messages between Desmond and Bianca. Now this. Dr. Brooks had stayed. He sat at the far end of the table with his coat draped over the back of his chair, reading the toxicology notes he'd already read twice. He looked up when Wren set the new pages down. Talissa reached for the stack. The first page was a death certificate. Carol Ann Greer, age 31. Cause of death, acute multi-organ failure. Manner of death, natural. Autopsy performed? No. Talissa read it twice. Then she read the line below the attending physician's signature, in the section marked "Next of kin present at time of death." Eleanor Greer, mother-in-law. She set the page down slowly. Wren picked up the next few pages, the hospital intake records from the 2 days Carol had spent admitted before she died. They were brief, sparse. A woman presenting with fatigue, nausea, and tremors, admitted for observation, dead within 48 hours. The attending physician had noted rapid organ deterioration of unknown cause, but had not flagged it for further investigation. The reason was in the notes, near the bottom of the intake form. Family reports patient has history of congenital liver condition. Mother-in-law, Eleanor Greer, present, confirms long-standing diagnosis. Per family account, prognosis consistent with natural disease progression. Dr. Brooks stood up and came to the table. He read the intake note over Talissa's shoulder. She heard him exhale, a slow, controlled breath, the kind a man makes when he is keeping his reaction professional. "Is there a medical history file?" he asked. Wren flipped to the next page, and the one after that. There was no record of a congenital liver condition anywhere in Carol Greer's prior medical history. Not in the intake records, not in the partial chart Dora had pulled from Carol's previous primary care physician. A woman who had been healthy, unremarkably healthy, right up until she wasn't. The pre-existing condition Eleanor described to that attending physician had never existed. She had invented it. Standing at her daughter-in-law's deathbed, she had invented a medical history. And it had been enough. Enough to satisfy a tired attending physician who had no reason to doubt a grieving mother-in-law's account. Enough to prevent an autopsy. Enough to close the file and let Carol Greer become a sad, quiet footnote. A young woman who died too soon from something she'd always had. Talissa pushed back from the table. She stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the afternoon light was pale and flat, the street below ordinary and unhurried. A woman walked a dog. A delivery truck idled at the corner. Everything out there was normal. She stood at the window and thought about Eleanor Greer. 9 years of Sunday dinners. 9 years of Eleanor touching her arm and saying, "You look tired, sweetheart." And, "Are you sure you're eating enough? And you know, some women just don't have the constitution for this kind of stress." 9 years of being managed, gently and persistently, like a problem that needed to stay small and quiet. Talissa had always thought Eleanor was protective of Desmond. She had thought it was the ordinary, smothering love of a woman who couldn't let her son be wrong about anything. It wasn't that. Eleanor knew what her son was capable of. She had stood in a hospital room 8 years ago and watched it happen to Carol. And then, when Desmond came home with Talissa, younger, sharp, healthy, Eleanor had done exactly what she had done before. She had helped manage the narrative. Every, "It's just nerves, honey." Every, "You're not as young as you used to be." Every casual dismissal, every redirect, every subtle suggestion that Talissa's body was betraying her rather than someone in her own home. None of it had been ignorance. It had been a practiced script. Eleanor had already learned her lines. Talissa stood at the window for a long moment. She did not cry. She felt something move through her. Grief, maybe, or something past grief, something colder and more certain. It settled in her chest like a stone finding the bottom. She turned around. Wren was watching her. Dr. Brooks was watching her. Neither of them spoke. "I'm done waiting," Talissa said. Her voice was steady. "Tell me how we set this up." The flowers were lilies, white ones, wrapped in craft paper, tied with a ribbon the color of cream, 20 stems at least, the kind of arrangement that took thought, or wanted to appear that way. Desmond was standing at the front desk of Talissa's brokerage when she came in from the parking lot on Tuesday morning. He looked up when the glass door opened, and his whole face shifted. Relief, pain, love, all of it arriving at once, in that particular order, like he'd practiced the sequence. "Baby," he said. Talissa stopped walking. Her office manager, Dana, was behind the front desk pretending to sort mail. She was not sorting mail. She was watching. Desmond crossed the lobby in 3 steps and held the flowers out. His eyes were wet. His shirt was pressed. He had shaved carefully, the way he did when something mattered. "I have been out of my mind," he said, voice low, intimate, meant only for her. "Please, just come home and talk to me. That's all I'm asking." Talissa looked at the flowers. Then she looked at him. She thought about 11 pages in a scanned packet. She thought about Eleanor Greer, present at time of death. She thought about a woman named Carol who had been healthy, unremarkably healthy, right up until she wasn't. "I'm not coming home, Desmond," she said, calm, level, like she was reading a number off a page. Something shifted behind his eyes, just for a second. Then the softness came back. "Talissa." His voice cracked on the second syllable. "I don't even know what I did. If I've been distant, if I've been... I know things haven't been easy. But I love you. I need you to come home so we can fix this." "I heard you," she said. "The answer is no." She walked past him, through the door to the back office, and closed it behind her. He didn't go quietly. That much she had expected. By Wednesday, Wren was sending her screenshots, a text from a mutual friend named Portia. "Hey, Desmond reached out. Are you okay? He seemed really worried." A voicemail from Desmond's college friend Marcus, who had Talissa's number from a dinner party 2 years ago. "Just checking on you. No pressure. Desmond mentioned you've been going through something." By Thursday, Eleanor had called 3 times. Talissa let all 3 go to voicemail and did not listen to them. The story Desmond was telling was already taking shape. She could feel its outline without needing to hear the specific words. "She's not well. She's been struggling for a while. I've tried to help, but she won't let me. I'm worried about her." It was a neat, sympathetic story. It cast him as the devoted husband and her as the woman coming apart at the seams. He was building a wall before she could build her own. Wren had warned her this would happen. "He's going to move fast," Wren had said 2 nights ago, sitting across from her at the kitchen table. "Once he figures out you're not coming back, and you're not scared, he's going to try to make you look unstable before you can make him look guilty. Don't engage. Don't correct anyone publicly. Don't post anything. Don't call Eleanor back. Let him talk." "Let him talk? Let him talk," Wren had repeated. "Every person he calls is another person who'll remember exactly what he said when this comes out. Let him build the story. We're building something too." So Talissa let him talk. On Friday morning, she drove to the precinct on Mercer Street and asked for Detective Yolanda Price, who she'd met once at a neighborhood association meeting and twice more at community events. Price was thorough, careful, not the type to dismiss paperwork. Talissa sat across from her in a small office with a window that faced the parking structure and laid everything on the desk. The toxicology report from Dr. Brooks, signed and dated, the photographs of the insurance documents and the medication bottles from the garage, a printed summary Wren had prepared, 3 pages, clean and numbered, walking through the financial timeline and the pharmacy access logs. Price read without interrupting. She asked 4 questions. She made copies of everything and handed the originals back. "This stays protective for now," Price said, "but it's on record. You understand what that means?" Talissa understood. She also, that same afternoon, sat with the attorney Wren had referred her to and began the paperwork for a restraining order. It was not filed yet, but it was drafted. It was ready. On Sunday evening, she called Desmond. He answered on the first ring. "I think we should talk in person," Talissa said. "I'd like to come to the house. Sit down together, with your mother, like adults. Thursday evening, 6 o'clock. A pause. Then she heard the relief move through him like air through a cracked door. He believed it immediately. Of course he did. He had spent 9 years teaching her to be small and agreeable, and some part of him had never stopped expecting her to come back to it. "Yes," he said. "Yes, absolutely. Thursday. I'll be here." "Good," she said. After she hung up, she opened her texts and typed the same message to 2 people. The message read, "Thursday, 6 o'clock. I need you both there." She sent it to Wren. She sent it to Dr. Brooks. Then she set the phone face down on the table and went to make herself some tea. The house looked the same. That was the first thing Talissa noticed when she pulled into the driveway. Same cream-colored shutters, same potted ferns flanking the front door, a little dry at the edges now. Same brass porch light Desmond had always meant to replace with something nicer. She sat in the car for a moment. Just a moment. Then she picked up her bag and went inside. Desmond had made an effort. She could see it the second she stepped through the front door. The dining room table was set. Real plates, not the everyday ones, the white ones with the thin gold rim they'd received as a wedding gift and almost never used. There was a candle lit in the center. Something was warming in the oven. The whole house smelled like the rosemary chicken he made when he wanted her to feel taken care of. Eleanor was already seated at the table. She had dressed up. Pearls, a blouse in dusty rose, her silver hair pinned back. She looked at Talissa the way she always looked at her. A slow, measuring scan, top to bottom, that she had never once bothered to disguise. "Talissa," Eleanor said, "you look tired." "Eleanor," Talissa said. Nothing else. Desmond came out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel, and the relief on his face was enormous. He opened his arms slightly, an invitation, and when Talissa didn't move toward him, he let them drop without making a scene of it. "I'm glad you came," he said. "I really am. Can I get you something? Wine?" I opened the Malbec. "I'm fine," Talissa said. "We should wait a few minutes. I invited a couple of people." The shift in his face was small, but immediate. "Who?" "Dr. Brooks," she said. "And Wren." Eleanor set down her water glass. "This is a family matter, Talissa." "It is," Talissa agreed. "But there's a lot of information to go through, and I wanted people here who could help me explain it clearly." Desmond looked at her for a long second. Something moved behind his eyes. Calculation. Not quite worry yet, but close. He was still deciding whether this was a problem or whether he could manage it. The doorbell rang. Wren sat at Talissa's right. Dr. Brooks sat at her left. She had positioned herself at the head of the table, the seat Desmond usually claimed. He had not said anything about it. He had taken his usual chair, now in the middle, and Eleanor had pulled hers slightly back, as though distance might protect her. Talisa set her bag on the table and unzipped it. She did not rush. She laid out 4 items in a row, like she was presenting comparable listings to a client. Neat. Ordered. A folder for each. "I want to walk through some things," she said. "I'd like everyone to stay seated and let me finish before anyone says anything." She opened the first folder. "This is a toxicology report from Dr. Brooks, dated 3 weeks ago. It shows elevated heavy metal markers in my blood work. Not a spike, a pattern. The kind that comes from repeated small doses over a long period of time." She slid it toward the center of the table. "Desmond, you can look at it if you'd like. You know what it means." Desmond's jaw tightened. "Talisa, I don't know what someone has told you. I said I'd like everyone to let me finish." He closed his mouth. She opened the second folder. "This is a life insurance policy taken out 3 months ago. $2 million. Sole beneficiary, Desmond Greer." She turned it so the signature line faced him. "That's my name on the signature line. It's not my signature." Eleanor made a sound. Not a word, just air moving through her nose. "The timing," Talisa continued, "between the policy date and the start of my symptoms is 11 days. She opened the third folder. "This is a record of pharmacy supply access logs from Desmond's hospital, cross-referenced with a junior buyer named Bianca Hall. There are 14 entries over the course of 8 months showing small diversions of a restricted substance to an untracked personal recipient." She did not look at Desmond's face when she said Bianca's name. She didn't need to. She heard Eleanor make the same sound again. "Bianca has been cooperating with investigators. She didn't know what it was for." The candle in the center of the table flickered. Nobody had moved. Talisa opened the fourth folder. "And this," she said, "is about Carol." Something broke in Eleanor's face, just for a second, just long enough. Carol died 8 years ago of organ failure. Natural causes. No autopsy. Because you, Eleanor, told the attending physician she had a pre-existing condition. Talisa tapped the page. She didn't have one. There's no record of it anywhere. Not her GP, not her specialist visits, not a single insurance claim. You made it up. And they believed you, because you were her mother-in-law and you were standing right there. Eleanor opened her mouth. "I'd like you to not finish that sentence," Talisa said quietly. The room went silent. The oven ticked. The candle burned. Desmond had gone very still. His face had done something complicated, the composure folding inward in stages, like a structure losing its supports, one beam at a time. He looked at the 4 folders lined up across the table, and then he looked at Talisa, and whatever he had expected this evening to be, it was not this. "Talisa." His voice had changed. The warmth was gone, something harder underneath it now, and something else, too. Something close to fear. "Baby, listen to me. Listen. Whatever you think you have here." "I don't think anything," she said. "I know." His hands pressed flat against the table. "You don't understand what you're doing. You have no idea the kind of trouble. Desmond." Her voice was even, completely even. "The police already have copies of everything on this table. I dropped them off on Friday." He stared at her. "And the restraining order," she said, "is already drafted." He pushed back his chair and stood up. Then he seemed to think better of it and sat back down. Then he looked at Dr. Brooks, and then at Wren, and then at the 4 folders again, and then, for the first time in 9 years, Talisa watched Desmond Greer run completely out of moves. What came next was not composure. It was not charm. "You're going to ruin everything," he said, and his voice cracked on the last word. "Everything. Do you understand that? Everything I've worked for. Everything we built." "You built a lie," Talissa said, "on top of a grave." He slammed his palm on the table. The gold-rimmed plates jumped, the candle tipped, and Wren caught it without flinching. "I can fix this," he said suddenly, leaning forward now. "Talissa, I can fix all of this. We can talk to the detective together. I can explain the insurance. It was a mistake. The broker made a mistake. And the pharmacy logs, those can be explained. That's a paperwork issue. Desmond and Carol, what happened with Carol was different. That was a different situation entirely. Desmond!" He stopped. Talissa looked at him across the white tablecloth, across the gold-rimmed plates, across the rosemary-scented air of the home she had lived in for 9 years and would never sleep in again. "There is nothing left to fix," she said. Desmond's eyes cut to Eleanor. It was a small movement, automatic, like a child looking for backup. Eleanor straightened in her chair and smoothed the front of her blouse. "Talissa," Eleanor said, and her voice had found its footing again, that particular tone she had always used, patient and pitying, the way you'd speak to someone who had embarrassed themselves at a party. "I think we all need to slow down. You've clearly been under an enormous amount of stress. We've all been worried about you. Desmond has been worried sick." Desmond seized on it immediately. "She's right." He stood again, slower this time, more deliberate, and when he spoke, his voice had shifted into something softer, wounded. "Baby, look at yourself. You come in here with folders and reports like this is a courtroom, like we're strangers. That's not you. That's not the woman I married." He shook his head slowly. "I don't know what Wren has been putting in your head, or what Brooks has been telling you, but you are not well. And I think somewhere, underneath all of this, you know that." He opened his hands toward her, a gesture of helplessness, of sadness. "You're fragile right now. You've been fragile for months, and I have been patient with that, Talissa. I have been so patient." "Patient," she repeated. Something in her voice stopped him. She did not raise it. She did not have to. "You told me my hair was falling out because I was getting older." She looked at him steadily. "I was 34. You said it like it was a kindness, like you were helping me understand something I was too vain to accept." She paused. "That was you. Every time." "Talissa, you told me the tremors were nerves, that the brain fog was stress, that I should be grateful you weren't making a bigger deal out of it?" She tilted her head slightly. "You used the word grateful more than once." His mouth opened. Nothing came out. "You let me sit across from doctors and wonder if I was losing my mind. You let me apologize to my clients for shaking hands." Her voice didn't waver. It was steady the way deep water is steady. Nothing rough on the surface, but no bottom you could reach. "You made me afraid that I was becoming too much, that I was getting old and difficult, and that one day you would just stop putting up with me." She let that sit for a moment. "That was the plan, wasn't it? Make me feel small enough that I wouldn't ask the right questions. Make me feel lucky to be looked after." She glanced once at Eleanor, then back to Desmond. "Both of you. For years." Eleanor's mouth was a thin line. She did not speak. "It didn't work," Talissa said, simply, finally, the way you close a folder when the numbers are settled. "I want you to know that. Whatever you thought you knew about me, about what I was afraid of, about how far you could push before I'd fold, you were wrong. You have always been wrong about me." Desmond's face went through something ugly then. The sadness curdled. The wounded look dropped away entirely, and what was underneath it was something she recognized now. The same thing she had seen for years without ever having a name for it. Not love, not even contempt, just cold, flat calculation. "You think this ends well for you?" he said, low and quiet. "You think you walk out of here and that's it?" "Yes," she said. He grabbed his jacket off the back of the chair and turned toward the front hallway. He made it 4 steps. The red and blue light came through the front window first, pulsing against the white walls, against the gold-rimmed plates, against Eleanor's pearl necklace. Then the sound. 2 car doors, footsteps on the front walk. Desmond stopped moving. Talisa crossed to the front door and opened it before anyone knocked. 2 officers stood on the porch. Behind them, a third was already coming around the side path. "Desmond Greer?" the first officer said, stepping inside. Desmond turned around slowly. He looked at Talisa. His face had gone the color of old chalk. "Friday," she said quietly. "I told you, I dropped everything off on Friday." They cuffed him in the front hallway, just beneath the framed photo she had hung in their first year here, the 2 of them at the coast, laughing, squinting into the sun. She had never gotten around to taking it down. She supposed she would, eventually. But not tonight. Wren stepped into the hallway from the dining room. She put her hand briefly on Talisa's shoulder and said nothing. Dr. Brooks remained in the dining room doorway, his hands folded, his face quiet and grave. From somewhere down the block, someone had come to their porch to look. Talisa stood in the doorframe and watched them take Desmond down the front walk, past the rose bushes she had planted in their second year, past the mailbox she'd repainted herself last spring, and into the back of the waiting car. She stayed until the door closed. Then she turned back into the house. Eleanor was still at the table, alone. The candle had burned low. Her hands were in her lap, and she was not looking at anything in particular. Not the folders, not the door, not Talisa. Just the middle distance. The pearl necklace caught the candlelight, the dusty rose blouse, the silver hair pinned back like she had somewhere important to be. She looked very small. Talisa stood in the doorway and looked at her for a long moment. The keys were small and cold in her palm. Talisa held them out to the young couple across the closing table, Maya and Jerome, 26 and 28, first-time buyers, so nervous when they'd first walked into her office 3 months ago that Jerome had knocked over a coffee cup and spent 5 full minutes apologizing for it. Now Jerome was gripping Maya's hand hard enough to whiten his knuckles. Maya had tears in her eyes, the good kind. "Congratulations," Talisa said. "It's yours." Maya laughed, a short, wet, overwhelmed sound, and Jerome pulled her into a hug right there at the table, still holding the keys. Talisa smiled and let them have the moment. She knew what it felt like to hold something you had worked hard for. She knew how rare it was to feel certain that it was really yours. Her assistant, a careful young woman named Petra, gathered the signed documents into their folders and slipped out of the room to make copies. The office was small but clean. Good light. Talisa had chosen the space herself, second floor of a renovated building on Halstead, with windows that faced east in the morning and filled the whole room with pale gold. She'd signed her own lease 6 months ago. No one else's name on it, no one else's signature but hers. Greer Property Group. 14 words on the frosted glass of the front door. Her name at the top of all of them. She'd left the brokerage in January. It hadn't been a hard decision. The hard decisions had all come earlier, in Wren's spare bedroom, at a folding table covered in printed bank statements and toxicology reports, at a kitchen table in her childhood home, while her mother stroked her hair like she was 12 again. Those were the hard ones. This, the office, the firm, the lease, had felt like the simplest thing in the world. Just the next step. Jerome finally released Maya and reached across the table to shake Talisa's hand. His grip was firm and warm. "We looked at 6 other agents," he said. "I just want you to know that. 6. "I know," she said. He blinked. "I mean, I figured you'd heard good things," he said, laughing a little. "I figured that's why you came," she said simply. "I'm glad you did." She left the office at 4, drove through the familiar grid of the city, the afternoon traffic, the low October sun coming in sideways through the windshield, and got home a little before 5. The house was on Carver Street, a 1940s craftsman with a covered porch and a wide front yard and a kitchen that got good light even in winter. She had found it herself, negotiated it herself, purchased it outright in August. The settlement from the divorce had covered most of it. The civil judgment from Eleanor's estate had covered the rest, with enough left over to fund the firm's first year without touching a loan. Desmond's insurance policy, the $2 million one, the one with her forged signature, had been voided the same week he was formally charged. Insurance fraud negated the contract entirely. His hospital had terminated him before the arraignment. His attorney had entered a not guilty plea, but the pharmacy logs and Bianca's cooperation had made the case clean. The trial date had been pushed twice. He was still waiting. He would keep waiting. Carol's case had been formally reopened in March. Talissa didn't follow it closely. She didn't need to. Eleanor was still in her own house as far as Talissa knew. Desmond, once the arrest had come and the lawyers had gotten involved, had pivoted entirely to saving himself, giving Eleanor nothing, protecting nothing but his own defense. He hadn't called her, hadn't arranged anything for her. He'd abandoned her the same way he'd abandoned everything else when it became inconvenient. Eleanor's attorney had reached out twice during the civil proceedings, and both times Talissa had let Wren handle it. Wren had not been gentle. Bianca had lost her position at the distributor, but she had not been charged. She'd given investigators everything they asked for: access logs, communications, the full record of every diversion, and the cooperation had been enough. Talissa didn't know where she'd landed. She hoped somewhere better. Bianca hadn't known. That mattered. Dr. Brooks had signed off on her clean blood work in May. 6 months of careful treatment, monitored levels, and her body had come back to itself slowly, the way things that have been patient always do. Her hair had stopped thinning. The tremors were gone. The metallic taste, that constant low wrongness she had spent a year being told to ignore, had been gone since February. She still saw him twice a year. He still had the same unhurried manner, the same habit of writing notes in the margins of her chart by hand. He had never spoken about the whisper again. He didn't need to. She didn't need him to. At 5 o'clock, Talissa stepped out onto the front porch with a cup of tea and sat down in the chair she'd put there in September. The street was quiet. A neighbor's dog was moving slowly along the sidewalk. Leaves had come down from the maple at the property line and gathered in a loose drift along the porch steps. The sun was going down behind the houses across the street. The sky had gone amber and then deeper. Copper and rose, and a thin line of pale green at the horizon. It was a good sky, the kind you noticed. She held the warm cup in both hands. She was well. It was not a dramatic feeling. It was not a flood or a rush or anything that announced itself. It was just there, solid. Real in the way that only things you have earned tend to be. She sat in the quiet and watched the light change, and she did not look away until the last of it was gone. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories on the screen that you have to watch next. Have a great day!